She was 18 years old, with her whole life ahead of her. But the river knew her secrets.
Take this pot and go to the river. Do not return until it is full.
Mammy.
The whole village of Umora knew the black pool. The whole village feared it. No one who went there alone at dawn.
But that morning, something waited at the water's edge. Something old, something wounded, something watching the girl walk toward it. And what that suffering stranger would ask of a girl who had nothing left to give would shake the whole village to its very roots. Ngozi pressed the cold clay of the pot against her chest and stepped out into the gray morning. The path under her bare feet was wet with dew, and the smell of the river green, heavy. An old reached her long before she could see the water. She did not cry. She had learned long ago that her stepmother fed on tears the way a fire feeds on dry grass. Her father had died when she was 12. He had been a kind man, a fisherman who sang to her at night, and when he was gone, his second wife, Madame Mazinwa, had peeled the love from that house, like skin from a yam. Ngozi slept now on the bare floor of the goat shed. She ate what the others left, and on this morning she had been sent to the one place a girl was sent only when someone wished her never to return. The black pool waited at the bend of the river, where the water grew still and dark and deep. The elders said the mother of the river slept beneath it. They said she tested the hearts of those who came, and that the cruel were swallowed, and the kind were carried home. Most people believed it was only a story to frighten children. Most people did not have a stepmother who wanted them gone. Before we continue, please like this video and subscribe so you never miss a story. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? To understand what happened at that river, you must first understand the house Ngozi was sent from. Madame Mazinwa was the wealthiest widow in Her late husband had left her a great walled compound with 3 sleeping huts, a storehouse fat with yams, and a herd of 20 goats whose bells could be heard across the whole village. She wore wrappers of indigo and gold, heavy coral beads at her throat, and she walked through the market like a woman who believed the ground itself should be grateful to carry her. But wealth had not made Madame Mazinwa soft. It had made her afraid. She had buried 2 husbands and 1 son, and somewhere along that road of graves, her heart had turned to a closed fist. She loved only one thing in this world, now, her own daughter, Nkachi, and she guarded her wealth the way a leopard guards meat, certain that everyone who came near wished to steal it from her. Nkachi was 18, plump and idle, with soft hands that had never carried water. She slept until the sun was high. She ate the choicest pieces of meat, and she had learned cruelty at her mother's knee, the way other children learn songs. "Why must she even sleep in our compound?" Nkechi would say, wrinkling her nose whenever Ngozi passed. "She smells of goats." And Madame Mazinwa would laugh, and the sound was like a pot cracking. Now, hear about. She was thin from too little food, and her hands were rough from too much work. But there was something in her that hardship had never been able to reach. She rose before dawn and worked until the stars came out. And still, Ngozi found a fledgling fallen from its nest. She would climb the iroko tree to put it back. When the blind old man, Papa Obe, sat forgotten at the edge of the market, it was Ngozi who carried him a share of her own small food, though she had little enough for herself. "Why do you give away what you do not have, child?" Papa Obi asked her once. His clouded eyes turned toward her voice. "Because kindness costs nothing, Papa," she said, "and I am too poor to waste anything that costs nothing." The old man had reached out and held her wrist, and his lips had trembled. "The river remembers a heart like yours," he whispered. "One day it will." Ngozi had only smiled and gone back to her work. She did not understand him then, but something strange had begun in Umwara that season. 3 times in one moon, travelers had spoken of an old woman seen at the black pool, covered in weeping sores, sitting at the water's edge, as though she were waiting for someone. Those who mocked her, the travelers said, met misfortune within days, and those few who showed her kindness were never heard to complain of anything again. No one knew who the old woman was, No one knew why she waited, and no one yet understood that Madame Azinwa had just sent her stepdaughter straight into that mystery, and that she had done it on purpose. The black pool was more beautiful and more terrible than Ngozi had imagined. The river widened here into a still dark mirror, ringed by tall reeds and the gray roots of an ancient silk cotton tree. No bird sang. The air smelled of wet earth and something sweeter beneath it, like flowers left too long in water. Mist hung above the surface, and the water was so black and so smooth that the sky seemed to lie drowned within it. Ngozi knelt at the muddy edge and lowered her pot. The cold of the water bit her fingers, and it was then, through the curling mist, that she saw the old woman. She was sitting among the reeds on the far bank, half folded into herself, and she was the most pitiful thing Ngozi had ever seen. Her skin hung loose on her bones. Open sores wept along her arms and her feet, and the flies that should have gathered on them strangely did not. Her eyes, when they lifted, were milky and tired, and her voice came out cracked as dry ground. "Daughter," the old woman called. "Daughter, I am thirsty, I am hungry, and I cannot reach the water myself. Will you help an old woman who has nothing?" Ngozi looked at her own empty hands. She had come with 1 cup of cracked melon seeds tied in a leaf, the only food she had stolen for herself before leaving, knowing she might be walking all day. It was all she had in the world. And here is the moment, friends, on which the whole story turns. Ngozi could have looked away. She could have filled her pot and run, the way fear and hunger told her to. Many would have, but she rose, and she waded through the cold black water that the whole village feared, to the woman everyone else had left to die. "Mama, do not be afraid," Ngozi said softly. "I am here." She cupped water in her hands and lifted it to the old woman's lips. She untied her leaf of melon seeds and pressed every last one into those trembling fingers. Then she tore a strip from her own wrapper, her only good wrapper, wetted in the river, and began to wash the weeping sores, gently, as a daughter washes a mother. The old woman watched her with those clouded eyes. "Child," she whispered, "you have nothing. Why do you give it all to me?" Ngozi smiled, though her own stomach was hollow with hunger. "Because you have less," she said, "and no one should suffer alone where there is another hand to hold." And in that moment, the black water of the pool, which had not moved in 100 years, began, very gently, to rise. What was this old woman, and why did the cursed river stir at the sound of a kind girl's voice? Ngozi did not run, even when the water curled around her ankles like a living thing. She held the old woman's frail hand through the long morning, and she sang to her the songs her father had once sung to her. Low and warm, the kind of songs that make even sorrow lie down and rest. The mist thinned, the sun broke through the silk cotton tree, and where its light touched the old woman's terrible sores, Ngozi saw something that froze the breath in her chest. The sores were closing. The broken skin was knitting itself smooth, and a faint silver glow had begun to rise from the old woman's body, like moonlight rising off water. "Mama," Ngozi whispered, drawing back. "Mama, what are you?" The old woman smiled, and as she smiled, the years fell from her face the way leaves fall from a tree in a strong wind. Her bent back straightened, her milky eyes clear to the deep green of the river itself. Her ragged skin shone now like polished bronze, and upon her head rose a crown of white coral and river pearls that no human hand had ever made. "For 100 years," she said, and her voice was the sound of deep water moving, "I have walked among this village, wearing sores and rags, to see who would show mercy to the lowest, and who would show only scorn. 100 years, daughter, and in all that time, you are the first who waded into the water you were taught to fear, to wash the wounds of a stranger who could give you nothing in return." Ngozi fell to her knees in the shallows. "You are the mother of the river," she breathed. "I am," said the goddess, "and you have given me your water, your bread, your wrapper, and your song, everything you owned in this world. Now hear me. The river remembers, and the river repays." The goddess lifted her hand, and the black pool blushed with light. She told Ngozi things no stranger could have known of her father the fisherman, of the songs he sang, of the kindness Ngozi had shown the blind man and the fallen bird. Each act counted and kept like treasure in the deep. "I have watched you for years," the goddess said. "I know the floor of the goat shed where you sleep. I know the empty bowls. They leave you. I know every tear you swallowed, so your stepmother would not feast on it. None of it was wasted, child, not one drop." Then the mother of the river told Ngozi to fill her great clay pot, and when Ngozi lifted it, dripping from the water, it was no longer water that filled it, but gold. Cowries and coral, bright cloth, and bars of soft yellow metal. River pearls white as teeth. More wealth than Madame Azinwa had gathered in 3 husbands' lifetimes. "Take this home," the goddess said. "Build a house with a door that is never closed to the hungry. And remember always what it cost you to learn that the river repays. Go, daughter. Go and live." Ngozi wept then, not the silent tears she had learned to hide, but great shaking sobs of a wound finally allowed to heal. She walked home through the morning carrying a pot of treasure, and for the first time in 5 years, Ngozi believed her suffering was over. It was not. When she came through the gate of the compound, gold spilling bright in her arms, Madame Azinwa's eyes went wide, not with shame, not with sorrow for what she had done, but with a hunger so naked it was terrible to see. And in that instant, the woman who had sent Ngozi to die changed her face as easily as changing a wrapper. "My daughter," Madame Azinwa cried, rushing forward with open arms. "My own sweet daughter, you have returned to us. Did I not always treat you as my own? Come, come, sit. You must be tired. Nkechi, bring your sister meat. The good meat." Meat. Nkechi, who had not spoken a kind word to Ngozi in 5 years, came forward with a plate. Her smile stretched tight as a drumskin, her eyes fixed all the while on the gold. "Where did you find such riches?" Madame Azinwa asked, her voice dripping like palm wine. "Tell your mother everything. Leave out nothing." And here, friends, is where a kinder story would have ended. But Madame Azinwa had never in her life seen wealth without wanting all of it. As Ngozi spoke of the old woman, the kindness, the goddess, the pot that filled with gold, the widow's mind was already turning, already scheming, already counting a treasure that was not hers. That night, Ngozi heard them whispering through the mud wall of the goat shed. "If a goat girl with nothing could earn all that," Madame Azinwa hissed, "imagine what my own true daughter will earn. You will go to the river at dawn. You will find this old woman, and you will bring home enough gold to make us the richest family in 3 villages. "And what of Ngozi?" Nkechi whispered. "She will tell people the river gave it to her, not to us. People will come to her door, not ours." There was a long silence, and when Madame Azinwa spoke again, her voice had gone cold and flat and final, and it carried clearly through the wall to the girl shivering on the other side. "Then we will make certain," the widow said, "that Ngozi is not here to tell anyone anything at all." Ngozi lay very still in the dark, her heart pounding against the cold floor. The gold had not ended her stepmother's cruelty. It had only given that cruelty a new and hungrier shape. What was Madame Azinwa planning to do to the girl who had finally found her freedom? At dawn, 2 things happened at once. And to tell this story truly, we must follow them both. At the river, Nkechi arrived at the black pool with an empty pot and an empty heart. She had not walked through dew and fear as Ngozi had. Her mother had sent 2 servants to carry her most of the way, and she came to the water complaining of the mud on her fine sandals. And there, among the reeds, sat the old woman, frail again, sores, weeping again. Milky eyes turned toward the sound of footsteps. "Daughter," the old woman called, "I am thirsty. I am hungry. Will you help an old woman who has nothing?" Nkechi curled her lip. "Help you? You are filthy. Keep your distance from me, you old goat." "I did not come to nurse a beggar," I came for what the river owes my family. Now tell me where the gold is, and be quick, or I will throw stones at you until you speak." The old woman's clouded eyes lifted slowly. "I asked only for water, child, and I am telling you to fetch your own." Nkechi snapped, and she kicked mud across the old woman's wounded feet and laughed. Meanwhile, back in the compound, Madame Azinwa had not waited for her daughter's return. Greed is an impatient master, while the village still slept. She came to the goat shed with a length of rope in her hands and murder in her face, intending to bind Ngozi, take air gold and cast her into a far well where no one would ever hear her call. But Ngozi was not on the floor. Warned by the whispers she had heard, the girl had risen in the dark and run, not away from the river. And so it was that all three of them came together at the black pool in the gray light, the cruel daughter mocking the goddess in disguise, the kind girl arriving breathless at the bank, and the widow charging behind her with a rope in her fist, screaming, "Thief! She has stolen my gold! Seize her!" For a moment, the whole world hung still. The mist, the reeds, the dark, watching water. Then the old woman among the reeds rose to her feet, and rose taller than any human woman, the sores falling from her like old garments, the silver light pouring out of her until the whole pool blazed with it. The crown of coral and pearl shone upon her head, and the mother of the river turned her terrible, beautiful green eyes upon Madame Azinwa and her daughter. Madame Azinwa staggered back, the rope slipping from her fingers. "What? What is this?" "This," said the goddess, and her voice rolled across the water like thunder under the earth, "is the one your house mocked, the one your daughter kicked into the mud, the one you sent to die, twice, for the crime of being poor and kind." The widow's mouth worked. First, she denied it. "Lies. I never harmed the child. I raised her as my own. I clothed her. I fed her. You fed her your scraps, and clothed her in your contempt," said the goddess. Then she deflected. "It was Nkechi's idea. The girl is wicked. She bewitched us. She—" "Mother!" Nkechi shrieked. Then, under the weight of that green and ancient stare, the widow's lies cracked, and the smaller truth fell out. I only wanted what was fair. She is not even my blood. Why should a goat girl carry home gold, while my own true daughter has nothing? I only took what should have been mine. And there it was, the justification, the rotten root of it all, spoken aloud at last. "I did what any mother would do," Madame Azinwa said, lifting her chin even now. "This is how the world is. The strong take. The clever keep. I taught my daughter to survive." It was Ngozi who answered her. 5 years of swallowed words rose up in the girl at last, and she stood straight in the shining water and spoke, and her voice did not shake. "No, Ma," she said. "You did not teach her to survive. You taught her that another person's suffering is a small price for your comfort. You had 3 sleeping huts and 20 goats, and a storehouse full of yam, and still you could not spare a goat girl a place that was not the floor. The river did not make me rich because I was clever. It made me rich because, when I had nothing, I still chose to give. That is the thing you never understood. Kindness was never weakness. It was the only true wealth in all your compound, and you threw it into the goat shed every single night. If this story is moving you, subscribe now. The ending will change how you see everything." Madame Azinwa opened her mouth to curse her, but the mother of the river raised one shining hand, and no more words came out of the widow's throat. The water around the 2 cruel ones began, slowly, to climb. By the time the sun stood full over the silk cotton tree, half the village of Amwara had come running, drawn by a light they could see from the rooftops and a sound like deep water singing. They gathered at the bank, the market women, the elders, blind Papa Obi led by a child, and they saw what no living person had seen in 100 years. The mother of the river, crowned and shining, standing upon the surface of the black pool as though it were stone. And before them all, the goddess spoke the full truth aloud, so that no one in Amwara could ever again pretend not to know it. She told of the kindness Ngozi had shown a stranger with nothing. She told of the gold freely given. She told of the whispering in the dark, the rope, the well, the plan to murder a girl for the crime of being repaid for her own goodness. The villagers turned to look at Madame Azine, and the widow who had walked through the market like a queen now shrank under the eyes of the people who had once feared her. "Hear the judgment of the river," said the goddess. "Wealth that is hoarded and guarded with cruelty is not wealth at all. It is a debt, and today that debt is called—" She turned her hand, and the gold in Madame Azinoi's storehouse, every cowrie, every coral, every yam, turned to river mud and ran black through the cracks of the compound floor, until the wealthiest widow in Amwara owned not one thing in this world but the wrapper on her back. Inkechi, who had kicked mud upon the suffering, found her soft idle hands, now hard and cracked as a laborer's, that she might at last learn the weight of the water she had never carried. The strong had taken, now the strong had nothing. Then the mother of the river turned to Ngozi, and all her terrible thunder softened to something gentle as rain on dry earth. "Come here, daughter," the goddess said. Ngozi waded out across the water that the whole village had taught her to fear, and the water held her up. She stood before the shining mother of the river, this thin girl in a torn wrapper who had slept 5 years on a goat-shed floor. And the goddess reached out and laid one cool hand against her cheek, the way a mother touches a child she has missed for a very long time. "You were the first in 100 years," the goddess said softly. "When you had nothing, you gave everything. When they taught you cruelty, you chose kindness anyway, every single day, where no one was watching and no reward could be hoped for. That is the rarest thing in all the world. Child, rarer than gold, rarer than coral, and it will never, ever be taken from you again." And Ngozi, who had not been touched with tenderness since her father died, who had learned to swallow her tears so they could not be used against her. Ngozi finally laid down that long, heavy silence, and she wept against the goddess's hand. And for the first time in 5 years, no one in the world could make her stop. The whole village stood in silence and watched a child be loved. When at last Ngozi lifted her head, the mother of the river smiled upon her and spoke a word the elders would repeat for generations. "The river does not reward the rich, nor the powerful, nor the proud," the goddess said. "The river rewards the open hand." When the rains came again that year, Amwara was not the village it had been. Where the goat shed had once stood, there was now a fine house of red earth and carved wood, with a wide veranda and a deep storehouse and a door that, by Ngozi's own command, was never closed. Travelers learned that at that house the hungry were always fed, the sick were always given a mat to rest on, and no one was ever turned away because they had nothing to give. Ngozi had built it exactly as the goddess told her, and she lived in it not as a woman who had been made rich, but as a woman who remembered, every single day, what it was to have nothing. She found Papa Obi a warm room in her own house, and she sat with him in the evenings, and she told him of the river. "I told you, child," the old man would say, his clouded eyes shining. "I told you, the river remembers a heart like yours." And Ngozi would hold his hand and agree that it did. As for Madame Azinois and her daughter Nekichi, the river did not strike them dead, for that is not the river's way. It left them their lives, and took only the thing they had loved above all else. They lived now in a small leaning hut at the far edge of the village, and to eat they fetched water and washed cloth for the very people they had once looked down upon. Sometimes, on a hard morning, their road would carry them past the open door of Ngozi's house, and Ngozi never once turned them away. She fed them at her table like anyone else, and she said nothing of the rope, or the well, or the goat-shed floor, for she had learned, better than they ever had, that cruelty answered with cruelty only deepens the river of sorrow, and that the strongest thing a wounded heart can ever do is keep its door open anyway. The villagers say that on quiet evenings, if you walk to the bend in the river where the water grows still and dark and deep, you can sometimes hear a woman singing low and warm, the old songs, the kind that make even sorrow lie down and rest. And they say The mother of the river listens, and is glad, because at last there is a heart in Amwara that gives the way she always hoped a human heart could give. Ngozi had walked to that river as a girl. Her own family had thrown away. She walked home from it as the one person in all the village who finally understood the truth, that what you give away when you have nothing is the only thing that ever truly belongs to you. Thank you for joining us for this story. Subscribe to Untold African Folktales Stories and click the bell so you never miss a story. Watch our next story here.